We're a ministry with a byline that tells it all, igniting movements of authentic Christianity. Our passion and burden is to see God once again descend in another great awakening upon our nation, so massive that historians would once again declare that God visited America in nationwide revival. And we just believe what God did in the days of Jonathan Edwards and George Whitefield and the Wesley brothers, where on the heels of that great awakening, 1/6 the population of the United States were swept into the kingdom of God and came to Christ. That would really translate to about 60 million people today if God were to move like he did then. And so then again in the Second Great Awakening in the 1790s, early 1800s, God just chose in response to the crying out of his people to come and descend and send another great movement of his Spirit, an outpouring of his Spirit in revival. And again, it impacted and affected every segment of our society. And many of the mission movements that we'd be familiar with today and really the social corrections that we made within our nation and the anti-slavery movement and so forth were birthed out of that season of awakening. So the very fabric, the moral fabric of our nation historically was really birthed during seasons of revival. Then a great prayer awakening that began on Fulton Street in 1857. Again, God swept across America. One of the stories I love to share is how there was a recorder of a newspaper who was in Los Angeles traveling to Boston, and he said at every city there were just buildings full of people that were praying and seeking God. We long for that to happen again in America.
Do you think revival is the answer to the national condition?
I think revival is the answer to the national condition. I think of two Christian leaders that had a meeting at the White House several years ago, and it was extended after meeting with the president. And they were shaking their heads as they were leaving. And one leader said to the other, if we don't have revival, there really is no hope. And that other leader looked at him, and if we do have revival, there is... Can I back up on that? Okay. I think of two leaders who met in the White House with the president, and the meeting was protracted, and they were just talking about the condition of the nation, much like it is today, even worse today. And as they walked out, one of those leaders turned to the other and said, you know, if we don't have revival, nothing else really matters. And that other leader wisely replied, and you know what else? If we do have revival, nothing else really matters. In other words, there's no hope apart from revival, and there's no hope like revival. And so the answer today is not in the political arena, it's not in the educational arena, it's not in Hollywood, it's not on Wall Street, it's not in the marketplace. The only hope is a supernatural, divine visitation of God from heaven. And I just believe there needs to be one cry, and it's a cry that Isaiah had in chapter 64 when he says, oh, that you would rend the heavens, that you would come down, and the mountains might flow down at your presence.